My name is Rosie Hale and I am 26 years old. Last Saturday at my sister's engagement party, my mother stood up in front of 40 guests and announced that Hollowthorn Farm, my grandmother's farmhouse in the Yorkshire Dales, would be passed to the family to fund Caitlin's wedding. She said it with the warmth of a woman doing something generous. What she did not say was that Hollowthorn Farm was never hers to give. But I didn't correct her, not there. Not in front of the bunting and the prosecco and the fairy lights strung between the apple trees. I smiled. I lifted my glass. And the next morning I called a woman named Patricia Oakes, the solicitor my grandmother had quietly hired 8 years ago, and I said, "It's time." Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and your local time in the comments below. I love knowing where you're watching from. Now let me take you back. Back to the farm, back to Gran, and back to the summer I was 11 years old when she told me something I didn't understand until last week. Hollowthorn Farm sits at the end of a lane so narrow you have to fold your wing mirrors in to pass the stone wall on the left. The farmhouse itself is limestone, low-roofed, with windows that rattle in November, and a kitchen that smells permanently of wood smoke and something sweet. Gran always said it was the old apple press, still buried somewhere in the cellar wall, still breathing out 40 years of cider into the plaster. The first summer I spent proper time there, I was 11. Gran Margaret Hale, though everyone called her Peggy, picked me up from the station in her ancient Land Rover that shuddered when it hit 40 and had a crack in the windscreen she'd taped over with clear packing tape. She put me to work immediately. First morning, repainting the garden gate. Second morning, helping her fix the latch on the hay barn. She showed me how the latch worked, how it had worked for 30 years, and why nobody had bothered to fix it until now. "Because I'm here," I said, "because I noticed." She looked at me in a way I couldn't read at 11. Now I think I understand it. That week she showed me every corner of Hollowthorn, not as a tour, as a handover. Here's the stopcock when the pipes freeze. Here's the electrics board, second switch from the left trips if you run the kettle and the toaster together. Here's where the boundary wall ends and the Pharaoh's field begins. Iron stake in the ground, covered in lichen. "Don't let anyone tell you it's further," she said. On the last night of that visit, she sat me down at the kitchen table, a great slab of oak she'd bought at auction in 1974, and she said, "Rosie, you're the only one who loves this place for what it is, not what it's worth. For what it is." I was 11. I thought she was being sentimental. She wasn't being sentimental. Our house in Leeds was fine. A semi-detached in a good postcode, cream carpets, a kitchen my mother had renovated twice. Fine. Warm enough, but not warmed. My sister Caitlin is 3 years younger than me and has always been, as my father put it, the social one. What he meant was that Caitlin filled rooms and I filled notebooks. Caitlin had friends over constantly. I had Gran's phone number memorized. At dinner when I was about 14, my father, David Hale, mentioned casually, the way he mentioned everything financial, that Gran's farm was sitting on a fair bit of land. Didcot and Moore valued it at just over $1 million. He said the land alone. My mother, Sandra, looked up with her particular expression of careful interest. "She should really think about releasing some equity," Sandra said, "at her age." "She's 68, I said. "Rosie." My father said my name the way he did when I'd said something that technically couldn't be argued with but was still somehow wrong. That weekend I called Gran and told her what they'd said. She laughed, not unkindly. "They've been thinking about that farm since before your grandfather died," she said. "Let them think, thinking costs nothing." I found out years later she had called Patricia Oakes the following Monday. I want to be careful about how I say this because I know how it sounds, and I know that Caitlin is not the villain of this story. Caitlin didn't ask to be the favorite. She simply was. She was easy and bright and pretty, and she laughed at Dad's jokes, and she never pushed back on anything, and she made our parents feel, I think, that they had done everything right. I pushed back on things. I asked why. I spent half term at Gran's instead of on the family holiday to Lanzarote. I chose geography and biology at a level when Sandra had suggested business and media. The gap between us, between Caitlin's world and mine, was never vicious. It was just quiet and continuous, and it had been there so long I'd stopped noticing the shape of it. When Gran died, I was 24, February, a Tuesday. I drove up to the farm in the dark and sat in the kitchen and didn't turn the lights on for a long time. The house breathed around me, cold but familiar. I knew every creak. The funeral was on a Thursday. Gray sky, frozen ground. Caitlin cried beautifully, the way she did everything naturally with good timing. My father gave a eulogy. He mentioned Gran's cooking, her stubbornness, her loyalty to the family. He mentioned the farm as Gran's beloved home. Past tense, beloved, already behind glass. At the wake, I watched my parents and Caitlin move through the rooms of Hollowthorn like people measuring up. Not obviously, not rudely, but I noticed it. The way Sandra's eyes tracked the ceiling beams. The way Dad opened the utility room door and left it open a beat too long, looking at the square footage. I said nothing. I had Patricia Oakes's card in my coat pocket, the one Gran had sent me in a birthday card 2 years earlier with a post-it note that said, "When the time comes, love, she knows everything." I wasn't ready yet, but I was paying attention. Between Gran's funeral and Caitlin's engagement party, the farm conversation became a slow, gentle, persistent pressure campaign. It began with practicality. The maintenance costs, Rosie. The council tax. Your father and I can't keep subsidizing a building none of us are using, which was not quite true. I drove up every third weekend. I fixed the gate latch again. I cleared the gutters. I found a local farmer, Tom Greenwood, who agreed to graze his flock on the backfield in exchange for maintaining the boundary walls. Then it became sentiment. Gran would have wanted the family to benefit, not for it to sit empty. She would not have. Gran was precise about what she wanted, and she had paid a solicitor to write it down. Then it became guilt. Caitlin and Marcus are trying to save for a house, Rosie. You've got a good job. You don't need the farm the way they need a start in life. I was a primary school teacher. I was not flush, but that was not the point, and we all knew it. I went quiet, not because I was surrendering, because I had learned patience from a woman who had outwitted property developers, a local council planning committee, and 40 years of a husband who thought he made all the decisions. I could outwait my parents. Then Caitlin got engaged, and the timeline changed. The engagement party was held at Hollowthorn Farm. My parents organized it. I did not point out the irony of celebrating in a building they were planning to sell. I brought wine. I helped string the fairy lights. Marcus is fine. I want to be clear about that too. He's a project manager from Harrogate, steady, kind to Caitlin, a little bit dull in the way that decent men often are. He did not know what was about to happen. I don't think Caitlin fully knew either. This was my parents' plan, and they had dressed it up so well that even the people inside thought it was spontaneous. My father stood up at 8 o'clock when the party was in full warmth, the kitchen glowing, people laughing, someone's toddler asleep on the old sofa under Gran's quilt, and he tapped his glass. He spoke about Gran, about family, about new beginnings, about how Margaret Hale would have wanted this house filled with celebration. Then he said, "As a family, we've agreed that Hollowthorn will be put to proper use. It'll fund Caitlin and Marcus's future, a home of their own, and the wedding they deserve." Applause, warm, genuine applause from 40 people who didn't know the context. Caitlin beamed. Sandra dabbed her eye. My father looked at me with an expression I had seen before, the preemptive look. The look that says don't, the look that expected me to smile and say nothing because I always had. I raised my glass. "Lovely speech, Dad," I said. He relaxed. Sandra relaxed. The party continued. I slipped out to the garden at 8:30 and called Patricia Oakes's number. Voicemail. I left a message. "It's Rosie Hale. They've made the announcement. We should move quickly. I'll call Monday." I went back inside. I ate canapés. I congratulated my sister. I stayed until 10. In the car on the way home, I cried not from sadness exactly, but from the particular exhaustion of knowing something and having to wait to use it. Patricia Oakes called me on the Sunday. She had heard my voicemail. She sounded, as she always did, like someone who had been unsurprisable for 30 years. "Your grandmother established a discretionary trust in 2016, she said. Hollowthorn Farm, the outbuildings, the 2 fields, the contents of the farmhouse, and a savings account with a current balance of approximately £340,000 were transferred into the trust at that time. You are the sole beneficiary. Your grandmother remained the trustee until her death, at which point trusteeship passed to me." "My parents don't know," I said. "No," said Patricia. "Your grandmother was very specific about that. She said, and I'm quoting directly from my notes, Sandra will talk herself into believing whatever arrangement suits her. I don't want to give her time to arrange." I laughed. Gran, even from the grave, still managed to sound exactly like herself. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Patricia said, "you formally accept your beneficial interest. I'll send you the paperwork today. Once signed and returned, if your parents attempt to sell, transfer, or remortgage the property, the trust record at the land registry will block them. It's been there since 2016. Any solicitor acting for a buyer will find it within the first 10 minutes of a title search. And if they've already spoken to estate agents," a brief pause, "then those conversations are about to become very awkward for them." I signed the acceptance documents on Sunday evening at Gran's kitchen table. The same oak table she'd bought at auction in 1974. I thought that was right. On Monday morning, Patricia made 2 calls and sent 1 letter. The first call was to Hawthorne and Reed, the estate agent my parents had apparently already contacted. I found out later they'd had a preliminary valuation done 3 weeks before the party, while I was up fixing the gutters. The agent's file showed Hollowthorn Farm under instruction from the Hale family estate. Patricia informed them that the property was held in trust, that she was the trustee, and that any instruction from David or Sandra Hale had no legal standing. The call lasted 4 minutes. The second call was to my father. I wasn't on that call. Patricia relayed it to me afterward with the economy of someone summarizing minutes. She had introduced herself, explained the trust, explained her role, and explained that the farm had not been part of Gran's estate at the time of death and could not be inherited, sold, or transferred by anyone other than the trust. My father had said, "That's impossible. We're the next of kin." Patricia had said, "You're the next of kin for assets that went through probate, Mr. Hale. The farm was placed in trust 8 years ago. It never entered the estate." There had been a long silence. Then, did Rosie know about this? Miss Hale became aware of the trust's full provisions on Sunday. Another silence. "I'd like to contest this." "You're very welcome to seek independent legal advice," Patricia said. "I'd suggest you ask them first to review the trust deed, the land registry entries from 2016, and your mother's capacity assessments from the same year. She was assessed as fully competent by 2 independent practitioners when the trust was established. You'll find there is no grounds for contest." He hung up. The letter went to Caitlin and Marcus's address, by recorded delivery, setting out in plain terms that the farm was not available as an asset toward their home or their wedding. Patricia noted that the letter was informational, not adversarial. She was giving them the information they needed before they made financial plans based on something that wasn't real. It arrived on Tuesday. My father rang me on Tuesday afternoon. I was in my classroom marking books. I let it ring. I called him back at 5, sitting in my car in the school car park with the engine running for warmth. "You knew." His voice was controlled. The control was doing a lot of work. "I knew there was a trust. I found out the full details on Sunday. And you said nothing at the party. You announced it in front of 40 people, Dad. There wasn't a version of that evening where I corrected you in public that didn't end badly for everyone." A pause. "We have already spoken to an agent." "I know. Patricia called them this morning." He exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Do you understand what you've done? I've accepted an inheritance my grandmother left me. You've taken something that could have secured your sister's future. And there it was. Not you've contested our claim, not you've acted behind our backs. No, you've taken from your sister." The repositioning was so fast, so fluent, I almost admired it. "Gran left me the farm," I said. "She made that decision 8 years ago and she was completely clear-minded when she made it. I didn't take anything from Caitlin. You promised Caitlin something that was never yours to promise." Silence. "She'll be devastated." "Then I'm sorry for that. But the answer isn't to give her something that belongs to me." He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in the car park for 10 minutes listening to the radio until I felt steady enough to drive. She called me on the Wednesday. I had been waiting for it. Her voice was quieter than I expected. Not angry. Something more complicated than angry. "Did you know at the party?" she asked. "No, I called Patricia that night. I got the full picture on Sunday, but you knew there was something." I hesitated. I knew Gran had made arrangements. I didn't know the details. She was quiet. I could hear her breathing, hear the small sounds of her flat, the kettle, a door. Mum and Dad told me it was all sorted. They told me weeks ago it was just a formality. I know. I'd already spoken to a venue. I closed my eyes. "Caitlin, I'm so sorry. That's not on you. You believed what they told you." Another silence. Longer. "Was Gran unhappy with me?" she asked, and her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I felt something open up in my chest that I hadn't expected. "No," I said immediately and completely certainly. "Gran adored you. This wasn't about you. It was about who she trusted to take care of the place. And she trusted you. She trusted me." I heard her exhale slowly. "It's a beautiful farm," she said finally. "Yeah," I said, "it is." We stayed on the phone another 20 minutes, not talking about the farm, talking about other things, small things, the way sisters can when the big thing is too much to hold all at once. The conversation with my parents happened 2 weeks later, at pub in Leeds, neutral ground, my suggestion. They came together, which I had expected. Sandra looked as though she hadn't slept well in a fortnight. My father had lost some of the certainty he usually carried in his shoulders. I let them speak first. They did, about the pressure, the money, the years they'd spent worrying about Caitlin's future, about how they genuinely believed the farm should benefit the whole family, not just me. I listened. I didn't argue. Then I said, I understand you were worried. I understand you thought you were solving a problem, but you made an announcement about something that wasn't yours to 40 people without asking me. And you'd been to an estate agent without telling me. That wasn't a family decision. That was a decision you made and then told me about at a party. My mother started to speak. I held up a hand gently. I'm not cutting you off. I'm not interested in punishing anyone. But I'm not selling the farm, and I need you to hear that as a full stop, not an opening position. My father looked at his pint. Gran loved this family, I said. She left me the farm because she trusted me to love it the way she did, not because she loved you less. Trusting me with the farm and loving you are not the same decision. He nodded once, the way he did when he couldn't argue with something but hadn't fully accepted it yet. It was the best I could hope for. We finished our drinks. We talked about other things. I drove home along the M62 and thought about Gran, and the gate latch and the stopcock and the second switch from the left on the electrics board. I moved into Hollowthorn Farm on the 1st of March. I'm renting out my flat in Leeds, not selling, not yet, and I'm driving 40 minutes to school each morning on roads that are sometimes iced and sometimes not, and I do not regret a single part of it. Tom Greenwood's flock are still in the back field. He helped me repoint the north wall last weekend, the two of us in waterproofs with a bag of mortar, him showing me where the frost damage was worst. He sounds just like Gran when he explains things, patient, practical, no drama. Patricia has formally withdrawn as trustee now that the protective period has passed. The farm is mine outright, held in my own name, clean title, no encumbrance. The oak kitchen table is still level. The bookshelves in the sitting room are still organized by color, warm oranges and reds in the corner by the fire, blues and greens along the far wall. And in the desk drawer by the window where Patricia told me to look, there was an envelope. My name in Gran's handwriting. Blue ink, letters leaning slightly right the way they always did. I won't read you all of it. Some of it is mine. But she wrote, I know this will have been hard. Hard to wait, hard to stay quiet. Hard to trust that the ground would hold. It held, didn't it? It held. I didn't do this for revenge. I want to be honest about that. I did it because my grandmother looked at an 11-year-old girl repainting a gate and saw someone who understood the difference between a place that has value and a place that's valuable. And she spent 8 years quietly making sure that girl could keep what mattered. I couldn't have done it without her. I couldn't have done it without patience. I couldn't have done it without trusting that the people who love you most sometimes do their best work before you even know you need it. If you're listening to this and you feel like everyone around you sees the people in your life as assets and opportunities, I want you to know, some people see you. They're out there. Sometimes they've already done something about it. I have one question for you before you go. If you could protect one place, one person, one promise, from the people who would turn it into a transaction, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story gave you something, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe if you haven't. The next one is already on its way. I'll be on the porch.